And I get goosebumps every time. I always follow Ayrton very closely. Anyway, it's very emotional. So we have Chase here. Chase is from Los Angeles. He's a specialist. He knows everything about cameras. He's a specialist. He's already on the next model, thinking about what is next. And Azul Serra, who's our star today. I'd like to introduce people. Barbara's going to be next to Chase because we only have from English to Portuguese, and then she's going to give you some things. So now we're going to have the marvelous team. Thank you. Good morning. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here at this table, to see the room full, people following at home. I would like to thank very much. I'd like to thank Netflix for this project, and also thank Vicente Amorim and all the wonderful team, the enormous team. This project really had a huge scale, and it's a lot of people. We're going to try here to talk about this scale. There's Senna has so many different sides that we could talk about. The direction of art, to talk about everything. It's very interesting because it's unique. So I'm very animated, very enthusiastic. I have Fininho here, who's my side. He was one of the people that was together with Diogo, who's at the back there, with the camera teams, Bill, who was our GIT, and our colorist. So we are going to try to show you interesting things, some interesting things about the color, not only the final color. And we're going to open to questions and curious things you might know. I think it's important to start talking about the structure that was done, because we noticed ever since the beginning that there were two sides within the production, and these talk to each other, but the strategies had to be very different. One was the drama part, which includes all the scenes with the actors, and the scenes, the starting scenes, where they were with a car and they were on the in the beginning of the races, and the part of the performance. So the part of the performance has a completely different approach. They're only cars, and we could spend months talking about this performance part. We worked with two different cameras. We did everything with Alexa 35, and we did it with Hedges in the performance side. So we're going to show you everything. But it was very interesting to have this mixture. We had Polex lenses. They broke, several broke. We're going to talk about this as well. And just for you to understand, this was I'd also like to say that this series had a lot of ABCs. I don't know how to say this, but Rodrigo Monte was an important person in this project. We had a lot of, or several operators together with Rodrigo Monte. We had Colli Gariak, who's an American, who also was essential, and he took a lot of care of the LED part in the volume side. And we also have camera operators that are from ABC, and they are wonderful. Yuri Marinhão, Milena Seta, Ariel, who's going to talk on the next table. He was also... I'll get there. Who else did the performance? Rubão also, Ernel also, and in the dramaturgy side, the one who shared with me the photography was Causini. So a lot of people. This is work that is a teamwork, a huge team. Yes, he's here. I think he'll pass by here. So since we're going to talk about cameras, I would like Fininho to introduce and talk about the structure of the camera and lenses schools, and we'll navigate from there. Good afternoon to everyone. I'm shy. I'm going to try to develop here, but I'd like to tell you that it's a huge pleasure to talk. Ever since I began working with this 18 years ago, it was a dream to be here. I used to be sitting on the chairs where you are, and I was always dreaming of being up here talking. I'm now here with my friends and people that I admire a lot as professionals. They're also my friends. So it's a huge pleasure, and I feel very emotional being here. Senna was a project. For me, it was a unique project. I think for everyone that was part of this project, it's a project. It was a huge project. It was very sort of audacious. So when we started thinking about the project, and ever since the invitation showed up, we started studying how we could develop this list of equipment and how we could attend to the photographer and the director with the best options that we had at that moment, since we had a sort of, we could help and suggest with whatever we wished to, and that was good for the project. But we were interested in working with the Alexa 35, and we started to develop this more robust list.
E mesmo eu não encabeçando a equipe de performance que foi feita.
And even though I wasn't ahead of the project, there were people from Argentina, and then there were people that incorporated this. I was responsible for making all the lists of cameras of all the units that we would use to film Senna. So it's a complex and robust list, because in playwriting, we in dramatic art, we chose this Alexa 35, and we ended up by complementing this with other lenses, the FDs, the Dipetska, and the Zunka 35, 25-120, plus another one which was the base of our list. And we also had for side angles, and the main camera was a Raptor, which we used for the frontal, for the cars, for the headshots of the cars. This had a technical specification, because when we researched a lot of cameras to try to do these flash cameras, and I talked about GoPro, but GoPro had a limitation of field depth that didn't satisfy the project. So we decided to use adapted GoPros we removed the front of the lenses, and we adapted Sem-out Bolex lenses to have a better depth. And this gave us good depth. I think this was the base of what we had. So we had all sorts of filters and lenses. We had all sorts of challenges, because since we were not filming with the actors, there was a lot of composition, post-production about the cars, and even about the actors and close, so we had to have a connectivity of information, even working with Hedge. So this was a complex challenge, mine and Giogo's, for us to be able to choose equipment that would have this connectivity with the Hedge, and these files were for the metadata of the camera and could be used later. So we used the focus commands, and all these scales. We use this using LDA for the cameras, and this file went to post. Then we did all sorts of tests, shooting tests, distortion, chrome, aberration, and this helped for all sorts of compositions of scenario, cars, all sorts of things. It was Alexa 35. We had 3 of these that were together, were with us full time. 2 main ones, camera A and B, and a third one, which would be an auxiliary one for some sequences if we needed a third, some scenes that we would need that. But basically everything that was done for the plot was done with these Alexas. We uses RIA had been launched, and it was fundamental, especially for us to have a wider range of communicating. Exactly, the communication between the camera and the commands. So this was fundamental. We did not use in the performance. This is equipment from the communication area between camera and focus command for long distance. You can change the antenna. It's really amazing. And then we use the high five command, and then we use they were all high five. And then for the control of the diaphragm and the Shichizu connected on the same system. So the interactivity for me, when I saw the size of the project, the screenplay, I chose talk to the boys. For me, connectivity was extremely important in a project this size, because it was an invisible universe often. We would film Suzuka at the same place of studio. Everything was green. We didn't know what was going to happen. So this made me a bit desperate, because how could I give a better information for them to have the minimum work possible and the creative possibility of working. So my idea ever since the beginning was to work interactively, to have communication between the lens, the camera in different formats. Doesn't matter if it's Hedge or R or GoPro, it doesn't matter. And we did this the best way possible with digital bulletin, ARRI, interactivity between the camera and the file. So this was a huge challenge, a gigantic challenge, because I had never done or used. So even knowing there's a real financial limitation of projects, so often you don't have the possibility of having everything of a certain brand and the connectivity with everything. This brings you a lot of, you feel secure and you have more information control, and this control served to other departments that are not linked to the sect. So this is something very important in the project, which I try to bring to my future projects as well. Fininho said that since we were in an environment, as he mentioned, with the Shizu, as we had all this integration of information. We had iris on the monitor and also the metadata. So this was also important for the post, because he used all the information of focus, of iris, focal distance, and it's something that Fininho configured all this in the lens, and it was automatically saved on the lens. So when we changed the lens, we wouldn't have to write anything down. It was already on the screen, all in the metadata, also for the focus and for the iris, but also, yes, but it goes to the metadata file. Well, the good idea was exactly that, to have the file with the information, dynamic metadata, where you can extract a focus passage or an iris passage, so you can see if it started at 1 meter decent and finished at 2, or if it started in 2.8, finished at 4. For post-production, it was essential to have all this information. Perfect. Well, what about Chase now?
Em inglês. Ele vai fazer uma apresentação.
Já que a gente está, né? Peraí.
Opa,
Oi.
diga.
Aí, já que a gente está falando já nessa parte toda técnica, vamos abrir aqui uma hora para ele aqui. Peraí. Quer assumir aqui o comando?
Porque realmente o review color science, tudo isso já está dentro da câmera, e eu acho que nada, o Chase é a melhor pessoa para falar sobre isso. Ele vai explanar um pouquinho sobre a ciência de cor.
About color science. Hoje eu vou falar sobre a tecnologia de imagem por trás da Alexa 35 e como isso consegue contar uma história criativa como Senna. Sou Chase. E eu acho que tudo começa com Cameras, incluindo a Alexa 35, aqui o sensor, e o sensor é um grande... trabalhamos muitos anos desenvolvendo esse sensor para ter o melhor sensor Super 35 no mundo. Sempre buscamos isso na ARRI. A melhor melhoria que eu acho que muitos dos nossos usuários perceberam imediatamente é que conseguimos aumentar o dynamic range, a faixa dinâmica, né? Ou a latitude de exposição, e indo para 17 stops de range dinâmico, né? 2 vezes stops mais do que outras coisas. Tínhamos muito range dinâmico com as mais antigas, mas agora você tem muito mais. Então, agora você pode expor com mais liberdade do que outros sistemas a esses stops, uma vez mais, né? E um total nos destaques e outros nas sombras. Então, esse é um dos filmes que foram lançados, um filme de lançamento do Alexa 35. E isso é uma das melhores representações de Dynamic Range por uma câmera. Essa imagem aqui é da Alexa 35. Geralmente, ela é normado para os displays padronizados, e aí você vai pensar, é a informação aqui perdida nas sombras, ou pode haver um pouco de clipping no vermelho, no LED vermelho, que o mergulhador está segurando. Agora, se você olhar esse processo de grading, de graduação, você vai ver que se você buscar para ver o que está lá, ainda você vê informações, mesmo nesses destaques, esses highlights payouts. E se você for fazer a graduação para sombras, você pode realçar as sombras e você consegue ver toda a informação das sombras. Então, para você ter uma ideia sobre o que a câmera vê com 17 stops, você vê uma coisa como isso, que é a imagem log C4. E você veria se você estivesse vendo um log qualquer. Can we switch off the light so that we can see better and things with precision here? Just turn down the lights. Please switch off the lights here so that we can see the screen better. Então, se olharmos a cor falsa, você tem a imagem de log, aqui é o índice de cores falsas que usamos na nossa câmera. Então, aqui você vê vermelho, seria quase que um clipping. Sempre queremos falar, quando começa a fazer o clipping, o roxo estaria no noise floor, né? no piso do ruízo. O que você não vai ver, você vai ver um pouquinho de amarelo e a área fora de foco da imagem, quanto a lanterna vermelha que o mergulhador mergulhador está segurando, né? E você tem um pouco de azul. Agora, com 17 stops de faixa dinâmica, né? Você vai captar muitas coisas. Uma coisa, depois de falar com azul, o formato que você usou provavelmente foi dos primeiros formatos que acharam, que bom, seria muito bom, mas eu não sei quantas vezes que as pessoas vão usar isso. E, de fato, é um formato muito popular, é a capacidade de conseguir rodar, não apenas com aquilo que chamáramos 4,6K sensores, né? O LF3 também. Agora, nesse novo modo, você pode usar toda a largura do sensor, 16:9, o aspect ratio, mas você não está registrando os dados a mais. Se você tiver com 16:9, esse formato é muito legal, especificamente quando você tem altas taxas de data, né? Data rates, né? Você consegue fazer isso. Você consegue fazer com 4,6K. Agora, sempre nos fazem essa pergunta, e o Alexa 35, de fato, esse sensor, né, é bem alto. Agora, um aspecto que eu acho que as pessoas não percebem é que quando você usa ele no Open Gate, ele te dá uma sensação de LF, pois ele está numa área maior do que 35, é 1/3 de um stop mais raso em termos de profundidade de campo, né? Então, aqui, você não tem que memorizar. Esse é o exemplo do formato Super 35 que nós temos. Então, com esse sensor, nós podemos cobrir tudo que o cliente vai precisar. 4K para cinema, o HD para televisão e o streaming, e também anamórfico para o 3,3K. Né? Então, o Alexa 35, se há um sensor aqui, se ele não está aqui, tem um bom motivo. Tem tantos diferentes modos de sensores, ele tenta cobrir toda a necessidade de todo mundo. Agora, uma coisa única aqui do Alexa 35, comparado com as antigas, é a sensibilidade melhorada. Então, simplesmente, o Alexa 35 tem essa sensibilidade maior. Todo índice de exposição, ISO, ISA, ele é mais limpa do que qualquer outra ARRI anterior. Se você pegar uma 1600, a Alexa 35 é 1600 e ainda seria mais limpa. Então, você pode ir além também. Você pode oferecer essa sensibilidade melhor que permite a conseguir imagens até muito mais claras e limpas, né? Com índice de exposição mais alto. Ele faz uma coisa que nenhuma outra câmera oferece. Ele, de fato, pega os frames entre os frames registrados. Então, se você está rodando 24 frames por segundo e você tem um shutter de 180 graus, ou seja, isso é 148 avos de um segundo. Ele captura uma imagem e aí os outros 148 avos de um segundo seria um frame preto para simular o movimento de um shutter aqui. Aqui, com IS, né, nós pegamos um frame preto entre as exposições e usamos isso como um mapa do ruído. Não é a imagem, é um mapa do ruído e num black frame, num frame preto. E usamos isso para reduzir o ruído no próximo frame gravado, né? Ou seja, isso é a subtração em tempo real do frame preto, tá? Agora, isso nos permite a ter imagens limpíssimas. A única diferença é como ele está indo 2 vezes mais rápido para conseguir os ASUS, você tem o máximo. Então, se você tem 100, aí, se você tem 100, e aí você vai pegar mais do que um frame rate, de uma razão de aspecto, né? Senão, não há penalidade, não há nenhum artefato ou mudança de qualidade. Ele está aí também. Agora eu vou falar sobre as texturas da ARRI. É como se tivesse um laboratório de cinema na câmera, né? Para os fotógrafos que querem ter texturas mais singulares, né? E aparências. Quando eu falo aparência, eu não me refiro à cor. Isso é uma coisa chave, que talvez seja mal entendido. As texturas acontecem antes do processo da cor. As texturas não definem cor, eles definem o tipo do grão, o tamanho, o formato do grão e também definir a quantidade de grão, de granularidade, né? Também o número de microcontrastes, e também a quantidade de o contraste macro, né, em geral. Então, tem uma série deles na câmera e você tem até umas novas que você pode carregar na câmera muito facilmente. Agora, com relação a entender essas texturas, fica fácil, uma vez que você souber o que você está vendo, para entender o que fazem essas texturas. Então, eu vou mostrar exemplos aqui. Não é apenas sobrenome, mas eu vou explicar como resolver os nomes. A letra em frente da textura é o tipo de grão. Então, quando você peça aos engenheiros, o que é isso? Nós elaboramos vários tipos de grãos e tínhamos que dar um tipo. Então, a letra se refere ao tipo. O número, o primeiro número, é a quantidade de grãos na imagem. Então, agora temos o segundo número, que é o contraste. Então, se você quiser saber, na imagem mais finas, né? É cabelo, são os poros, são detalhes muito finos, sutis. E o último é o contraste na estrutura de imagem mais bruta, né? É coisas mais fortes, mais maiores, seria uma viga em preto, alguma coisa assim. E daí você tem... Então, aqui você tem a textura Default K445 e aqui você tem o índice de exposição 800 e aí você tem P425. Você consegue ver, é muito semelhante em números, as letras são diferentes, apenas um número é diferente. E da distância você vai dizer, eu não vejo grande diferença, acho que tem algo errado. Agora, é verdade, ainda é muito sutil. Agora, se você entrar, fazer um close nisso no rosto, o que você vai ver é que com a textura cosmética, tem 2, ao invés de 5 no número do meio, né? Então, a renderização é mais suave desses detalhes, né? Então, isso pode ser útil se você quiser fazer uma coisa onde você quer que o ator tenha uma aparência mais simpática. Então, texturas também que podem ser opostas, como essa aqui. Veja, essa é a textura de alta claridade. Veja os números F, tá? 7 para microcontraste, 8 para macrocontraste. Isso talvez seja o mais óbvio. Eu não sei se você consegue ver a 3, mas na tela do computador eu já consigo ver que a imagem à direita é um pouco mais precisa, né? Mais aguda. E aí, à direita, você consegue ver a acuidade mesmo da imagem. Alguns clientes usam outras câmeras, até vermelhas, e eles dizem, eu quero uma coisa com muita acuidade, né? Uma imagem. Agora, se você faz uma coisa com documentário, algo de natureza, onde que você quer mostrar o ambiente, ou fazer a sensação do ambiente, você usaria a textura de alta claridade, né? Então, a última textura que falamos é o mais famoso em termos de todos gostarem. É aquela textura nostálgica, né? Para refletir uma coisa. Então, de uma distância, não há tanta diferença. É difícil julgar quando não são imagens que se movem, mas quando eu entrar e fazer o close, você vê a diferença, é óbvio. Veja quão mais suave, esses detalhes mais finos, quantos grãos, mais granularidade tem mais. É muito cinemático, né? Não tem tanta cor, é meio preto no branco, mas não é uma coisa cromática, como o ruído se encontra no sensor, mas é uma coisa muito... É uma aparência bem gostosa de olhar, digamos, né? E aí temos esse aqui também, aquela que é super nostálgico, que vai até mais além. O normal ele foi considerado baseado num estoque moderno Super 35, mas o cliente falou que era mais granularidade, como o mais antigo. Então, acrescentamos um Custom Super Nostalgic, que é o G833. E aí, fomos até mais além, pois os alemães dizem, nós vamos continuar. Então, agora você tem esse Custom Extreme Nostalgic. Agora, temos que tomar cuidado. Tem que falar com o pessoal do pós-produção, né? Senão você vai começar a rodar e vão achar que a câmera está quebrada. Outra coisa que fizemos, que lançamos mão, mudamos a forma que os arquivos parecem, né? Com as câmeras mais antigas, né? Isso é comum, não é só a ARRI. Tudo estava num único look file, arquivo de look, né? Como você queria as imagens, você queria uma coisa mais quente, mais fria, mais verde, mais saturação, mais contraste. Tudo isso, como cinematógrafo, essa é a intenção que você quer para criar seu produto, né? Agora, com as câmeras mais antigas, estava tudo junto no display transform, né? Como isso era interpretado com um tipo correto de display? Chama-se DRT. Então, você nunca pode separar isso. Se você fazer esse LUT para 709, ia só ser bom para o REC 709. Agora, com a Alexa 35, queria ser mais a prova do futuro, pois não sabíamos que tipos de displays iam existir 15 anos depois, né? Então, queríamos separar o look criativo, a intenção, da forma que ela era transformada, que é um processo técnico para o display. Então, com a Alexa 35, agora nós temos arquivos AL4 e não 2, aí você consegue separar tudo. E na câmera, dentro da câmera, como temos esse poder de processamento, ele faz as conversões, a Alexa 35. Então, ele faz. Não importa o que você quer. Então, fica muito fácil. Você está no set. Se você tiver o luxo de ter um monitor HDR, você pode usar o mesmo look, né? ALF4 para o REC 709 e HDR. E mais um bônus aqui, eu sei que muitos fotógrafos já tiveram essa experiência. Você faz um LUT, recarrega na câmera e o cliente vai dizer, isso é um pouco demais. Vamos diminuir um pouco isso. Eu quero uma versão diferente, eu quero menos intensidade, mas aí com a Alexa 35, você consegue ajustar isso em incrementos de 10%. Então, 100% é o que você criou. O colorista, se você for. Agora, você pode diminuir, dar menos intensidade. E você consegue salvar a intensidade que foi usada durante a filmagem, durante a cena, né? Você salva isso tudo. Nós fizemos isso com o Minion. O setup era 25, 50, 17... Já tinha... isso é fantástico, que maravilha saber disso. E aí, a última parte seria o review, né? O review, o Color Science, é a próxima geração de Color Science introduzido com a Alexa 35. Mas você pode usar isso na pós-produção com as câmeras mais antigas da ARRI. Aí, se você quiser, fala comigo depois. Eu estou no stand da ARRI. Aqui é um color chart, um gráfico de cores, né? Alemão. Eles fazem a coisa de uma forma mais diferente, né? Aí nós temos o Color Science original da ARRI e agora o Review. Então, talvez você não veja tanta diferença, mas se você olhar mais de perto, veja no original todos os vermelhos aqui, os magentas, os vermelhos e algumas outras cores estão juntas. Então, elas parecem quase que é uma única cor. Mas veja quão mais legal essa separação sutil no review. Tá? Agora, vamos ver as pimentas. Para mim, as pimentas à esquerda, com o original, parecem meio achatados, quase que bidimensionais. Tem o mesmo tom de cor, quase. E os pimentões não são assim. Eles são muito mais parecidos com os pimentões na direita, né? Onde você tem mais nuance, mais sutileza, mais dimensionalidade nos pimentões, né? Então, os alemães falaram, chega, Não, queremos mais para mostrar para os fotógrafos. Então, em Los Angeles, encontramos um palco que chamamos de teste de tortura, tá? Há tanta cor, luzes saturadas, usamos o Alexia Minialev e queríamos mostrar como processar isso com o novo Color Science. Então, aqui você vê a imagem com o original, tá? E aqui você vê com o review.
Mais uma vez, aqui tem o original, todas as câmeras ARRI, e depois o review. Agora vamos ver primeiro o original. Era difícil com esses vermelhos muito saturados. Vocês podem ver, esses vermelhos se tornavam magenta. No review, a gente consegue manter esse vermelho saturado, tipo um vermelho sangue, e manter essa pureza aí. Se você olhar os lilazes ou os roxos, são complicados para qualquer câmera. Todos eles tinham um plano, o mesmo tom de lilás, e não é muito preciso, não é como o seu olho veria. Então, você pode ver quanto mais informação ver, porque você tem essa sutileza no novo review. Se você olhar o azul aqui também, mais uma vez, isso tem a ver com sutileza. O azul parece todo o mesmo tom, mas no novo é muito mais preciso. A forma de que o Art e eu, o cara que fez isso, ele descreveu, parece que o Old Color Designer era muito preciso, mas do tom da luz, e a saturação e o tom que vinha da luz, mas não era muito preciso quando você considera que a luz estava saindo, vindo de outros produtos, não estava só saindo. Então, parece que agora o novo leva em conta essa absorção das superfícies. Assim, é a forma melhor de descrever. A ciência das cores é muito difícil. Então, são termos que a gente usa, formas de explicar. Isso aqui são os lilazes que vocês viram antes. Aqui são os carros dos freios. Então, a cor da luz do freio é muito importante. Você pode aqui ver a reflexão do piso brilhante. É só um reflexo, não é uma luz, mas vocês conseguem ver como é muito mais preciso do lado direito comparado com o lado esquerdo. E aqui, para terminar, nós temos mais um exemplo. Esse aqui é o exemplo do Review Color Science versus o original, mas em outra parte do palco. Vocês podem visualizar aqui a diferença, é bastante extraordinário, com os vermelhos saturados e aqui os azuis saturados, uma diferença bem grande. Esse mais um exemplo. Esse aqui é o meu predileto, falo a verdade. Isso aqui é a diferença, que eu acho que faz uma grande diferença quando a gente olha como a gente está iluminando pessoas com iluminação colorida. Aqui é uma iluminação lilás e você nem pode ver que ele é humano. Você não pode distinguir a cor da camisa, porque as tonalidades são ruins. Agora, se você olha o novo, é bem diferente. E para mostrar não só as tonalidades da pele e a camisa, eu quero mostrar para vocês esse sinal aqui. Nós pegamos um picker e quando a gente olhou, a gente falou, meu Deus, só tem azul, não tem vermelho, não tem verde, não tem nada. Nesse sinal de fechado, close. Agora, você olha a imagem do lado direito, que tem uma renderização muito melhor dessa sinalização. É isso aí, pessoal. Obrigado, Chase. Also, something that I asked, we didn't have the Alexa Mini Reveal Color Science, but yes, you can do it. Reveal Color Science is also compatible with Alexa Minimum. Sim. One thing about the noise, it's like these earphones that have noise canceling. Noise canceling plus sound, less sound. So you cut the noise So noise plus image, less noise. Cut, image. Basically, it's that if you explain it in a very simplistic way to be able to understand well. Obrigada, Chase. So let's go back to Senna. I have a lot of things to show. I'm going to try not to speed up, but I think you're also curious to know. So before we start, I'd like to explain how our visual narrative was structured for Senna. Clearly, we divided this screenplay in 4 different plays. First, there were 3, and then the 4th one appeared. I'm going to explain a bit later. But we had a situation that was his life, a linear life, but clearly there were blocks that we wanted to have something different. Right in the beginning, the first conversations that we had, we wanted the look of the series to be just one look. So we wanted a way to choose different formats, then 16, and then maybe more video, which is a bit the way it's the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. It's what we see in the series. So I said no. This would be done through other elements, light, a bit of the color intent, the movements of the camera, compositions, lenses. So it's to explain when I go to the art direction, they have these beautiful murals with all the phases, and I stay there for hours looking. So this is the first one that I did the same thing, which is more or less what I understood. Because if you look, each race, we had to understand what each race had to be shown. So, for example, the 89 one that just has, what are we going to film? The pit wall, the box, or what specific scene do we have to be sure that we're capturing? So, yes, it's this. So, when people arrived at the project, it was quite crazy. It said, no, it's not Suzuka 89, 91, no, it's Estorio 84. So I don't understand so much about Formula One. So we had to segment this, and there was a copy of this in his apartment in Argentina where he worked. I had never gone through such a big pre-production. It was 9 months for a photographer. This is rare to take place. Imagine, we can hardly be able to be paid 5-6 weeks. Imagine 90 months. There was a lot of research, a lot of file research, a lot of tests. I would love to show you, but let's move forward. Now let's thinking about these 4 phases. I'm going to tell you a bit about these different phases, how we developed them, and then we're going to talk specifically about color with these 2. So the first phase was the childhood phase, not only childhood, but Brazil. So inevitably it had an intent of being a sort of warmer, welcoming, where Senna would go back and he had his family. Brazil culture, it was more or less natural that we chose this warmer direction, and that we would work more angular lenses, that would be very close to him, close to the child, that we would have a sensation of being intimate. So this series here, talking about the story of Senna, is also talking about a story of photography and of images, because 60s, 70s, there were different photographers that photographed his life. He would register a lot of things. So my Instagram, after I started, it only had Senna, and a million photos that no one had ever seen, the art direction bringing references, and the question started being something else, how to filter, how to find a certain look. Interesting things, these were photographs that we chose. This left side photograph, there's a scene, his father and himself in the car. There's an emotional scene at the end where his father teaches him to drive and to feel the driving wheel, and then this was something very, very cool to see, so to speak, the quantity of different looks. If you look at each one of these photos, it has a different texture, lower magenta, green. So this was a reference base. Then we wanted to, in the research, we researched films that had a bit of this look. The definition of more dreamlike, the sense of the family presence, and here a bit of what we got to at the end. So I'm going to show you a video showing a bit of this. If you can please put the light out, please increase the volume, sound volume. Second phase is when he goes to the lower categories, and he was lonely because he was very young, and he had to, for the first time he was there, he didn't know how to speak English properly, so there was a kind of a dislocation, and we wanted to show this. So there was sort of frames that express a bit of this loneliness, sort of some more open ones with him alone, sort of colder than the beginning, and a lot of empty space. We were trying to do sort of open plans to give this sensation of loneliness. Look at him with pajamas up top. Unbelievable. And then there were several races, there were several categories that he passed through, and we decided, due to that we were going to film everything in a racing track at the south of Argentina, which was really very cold. It was unbelievable. And so we looked for references that had this sort of denser look, silhouettes, that the camera would move slowly and giving you the sensation that this phase for him was very difficult because there was the father issue that wanted to protect him, wanted to come back, and it was the big challenge. The big first challenge was for him to start winning, and we wanted to transmit this at all moments with decoupage, with movements of the camera, and here a bit of the second phase. Let's show you another track here. Now we're going to talk about the third phase, which is the phase that is longer. I think that it's 2.5 episodes, which is Formula One, which Vicente was harping on a topic in a certain way. Formula One had to give you a sort of a hostile sensation because Senna was always being tested and tested and tested, and he had to the whole time prove himself, and he had to it was a very artificial world. It was crazy. The teams, everyone has the same uniform with solid colors, blue, yellow, and there was a sort of a plastic artificiality, a sort of Las Vegas. We always said that we had to, it would have to be something that would give you the idea of dynamism. It had to be something pulsing. It's a very stimulating universe visual-wise. So one of the main things that we recognize was let's lighten this up in a way to pass on this aggressiveness. Then I remembered Robert Richardson, the way that he does these highlights. He does some counter lights that are not justifiable, but they hit the table and come back in a funny way, or a sort of counter light that in a certain way is strange. There had to be something strange. Of course, it's a long phase. Not every scene has this, but every time we could, whenever we could, we would do this and increase this more. Let's give it more the sort of wrong feeling. We was always on the limit of it being strange or bursting. it was much. Vicente loved this. This shots was about 135 or 100. No, let's do it with blue, with a duplicator from far, because there was this sort of oppressive thing that he wanted to transmit. Here are some examples of references that we looked for in this style. A good part of this research was done together with Renatinho, who is the person who worked with me in the whole pre, and he's together with me now. He helped me a lot to put this all together. And one more, images that have this subjective nature for me, and some images that transmit this. So for me, it was a big challenge to look at the front light, which is something that we normally run away from because we enjoy a contrast. And I said, no, but I think it's interesting for us to have sometimes to have a light that's not comfortable. For example, when there were interviews, and I'd say, no, go up, even if his face was too, because there was a sort of stimulus like Las Vegas, so the lights had to be very close, as if he was closing his eyes. So this was a challenge that I put myself to accept the front light, and it was marvelous. In here, where he's interviewing, this one is a bit aside, but there's a moment where the light comes on and his whole face is lit up with no shadow. All these insecurities that we have when we're doing something like this. And then I'm going to show you a piece of the race, which is a Japanese dinner, but it's also interesting to see that often we create concepts that are determining and that make sense. In part of the narrative, and then we say how we're going to apply this concept in another scene or with another condition. This I don't know how to answer. I'm still trying to see how to do it. But the whole time it is like this. So I think that this scene is a good example to see how what happened outside the race course.
And so, as I had mentioned, there were these three phases, but there was something, the fourth phase, which are his last days when he goes to Williams. And something was always in my mind. When we recognize Senna in our imagination, it is often linked to the colors of McLaren, when he was a champion, when he was always the very best, right? It was always red, white, and the yellow helmet. But there was this imagination which was years looking at this spectrum of colors. And so when he goes to Williams, kind of everything changes, and then it's blue. It's like, everything became blue, and it was very strange. I thought that was really strange. I couldn't get used to this idea. So the images that we had of Senna, specifically on that weekend, which are very, 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 it's very impactful. Everybody will remember his last 2 days in life, right? Where he would go around all the boxes and he was feeling really strange. His face was really strange. All his images were, instead of being red and white, they were blue and white. So we kind of guessed, that we had to go to a next phase, and then we wanted to have some kind of element in the image which wasn't only just a color element. It had to already kind of announce the texture of the image, the contrast, and this would announce that he was going into another world, which was an oniric type of world. I wanted to do something more kind of spiritual, with some kind of degree where he was kind of leaving his reality. And then we found this picture, which was one of his very last pictures, right? Obviously, this is a very creative work here in this proposal, but this is what was triggered us to enter this world, which in my mind, well, the first thing I saw was the essay on blindness. Cesar, you're here? The essay on blindness, and which was this paleness. It wasn't only paleness, because it could be something like a horror, like a horror film where skin tone or skin would be listed, but it had something milky kind of happening, right? And within the measure of contrast we had, we went to places where we could have a lot of white and zones in the images, right? Many things that could be burst, many reflexes, which could take us to this place, this oniric place. And for me, it's an honor, Cesar, to be able to talk to you. Thank you for the inspiration. And we decided to go towards this path. And it's very interesting, because when you have a look like this, which works in the races, right, we were able to develop this. But how is this look in the hotel, in his home, in a situation that has nothing to do with the race? And this for us was a challenge to understand how to do this. And that's it. And just to explain to you these 4 phases. And also we're going to go into, we're going to talk with Lou together. And I think it was 9 color agendas that we had before beginning the shooting, right? Because it's rare. We almost don't have a space, any room to be able to work and develop and go wrong and go wrong and go wrong until we begin liking something, right? No, you have to do the look, and this is the LUT, the LUT, the L-U-T, and that's it. You have to elaborate, and then you think of how you're going to transform things afterwards. Yeah. Well, I think that the proposal of the blue was just amazing, and there were a lot of points. There was a unity in itself, but it was kind of, for example, these 9 agendas and things between in the pre-filming, pre-production. We began to understand these LUTs, and I worked with this. And there is a creative aspect, but I think there is a technical support, the colorist, right? The relationship between the cinematographer and the DOP and the colorist, because it's important they receive these ideas, the proposals to develop the images. And so how do we begin, right? How do we begin to approve things? I think there is one part which is very technical. Alexa 35. Why did you choose the camera? Because it was the camera that contained and could, in this dynamic range, reproduce that he was looking for, right? And so once we began advancing with the pre-production, we began to see how to create these LUTs. We had percentages. And so within these 9 agendas, these 9 phases, there was something that was very important for us to understand, which was the look that we were going to give. The first big look we were going to give, right? Because no matter how much you think, I want it to be so and sad, but there is a race in the rain, on a cloudy day, in the end of an afternoon. Of course, things changes, but we had to feel sure about the color and the texture. And once we saw several pictures of his life, raising his personal life, we came to this middle picture here, photo, which is for me and Lou. This is the picture. Every time we have to know where we're going to, we will go back to this picture, because there is the yellow, which everybody has this yellow in their imagination. That is the red that we're going to reproduce, and the white. And I insisted in the white because it's very easy for us with, with the idea of creating different looks, impacting an image. Image always goes to a place where white, we end up dyeing things a bit, and so it's not white anymore. This one to the left was a huge reference for us too, because white is white, red is red, the yellow is yellow. So we have these solid colors. And it's specifically with regards to the car, which is the right image to the right. And you see, this is an image that we produced, right? So we needed to know, if you need to know where to go with an image, these were the images that gave us a guiding light. And so here, what did we do? I usually take a lot of pictures when I'm doing my scout locations, right? Location scouting, right? So, and also I take them home to study. I open the Lightroom, I program it, I keep testing colors, I go wrong, I make one error here and another one here. But one thing I asked the team, I said, next time we go, if you can ask us, use some kind of red or blue or yellow jacket, it will help. So here's Renatinho in red, Renato. And then the team, I would take pictures. I would go back to with the pictures to Lou, and Lou would play with these pictures. And we would create lots, even before starting with the camera. So we had this setup here. We didn't have ARRI yet. ARRI cameras were not together with us yet, but we were already working here. And something was very interesting here, too, that happened. And that's why I have this picture here. These pictures to the right, specifically, because if you look at the picture on the left, which is Senna's picture, and it's real, you have red, you have white, red, and yellow, and the sky is white. Because if the sky were blue, you would have a fourth color, and it would mess things up a bit. So if you look at these pictures here, the only difference from the picture below is that we removed the sky, so things become purer. The image is more concentrated in the red and the yellow. So when I noticed this, I noticed a series of things about the sky, in the films that I do, right? How many, how often, all the times we ignore the color of the selves, and in external shots, right, external planes, there are volumes they occupy a third of the area in the image, and it has a color that we don't really care too much about. For example, sometimes it's a baby blue, sometimes it's a deep blue. So I began to be a little psychopathic here. And so I began to understand this as a color area. The color that my picture goes from one side to the other. So with Senna, most of the sky is white. It only enters, and it's a narrative. In Interlagos, you see this nice, beautiful sky with this idea of being something more comfortable. So we also did this in the second phase, which was a very interesting phase because it was a cold phase. It had to be cold because of England, and we found these pictures which are very cold, but the colors are absolutely strong and pulsing. It's not a bluish where you dye the image. We had to be very careful this all the time. Let's cool things down, and then things. Yeah, it had this separation of colors, and also sometimes we wanted to have a little bit of golden here in his victories in England, right? So you removed my blues. Format? Yeah, 4.6K. And once again, we asked the team with colors, and I was taking pictures of everybody and testing these LUTs. So these are very different than those images I showed of the Formula One. And this is how the result of things, the original picture above, and each one of the phases with a different motif. When we got to this map, things then began to work. Every LUT was either 100%, 75%, 50%, 25%. It wasn't the camera. It was exported. We did one specific LUT for 25, another 50, and now with the camera. So we had, when we were doing the light grading, we went from C4, log C4, and then when color was processed. And this graduation of LUT, we did in the LUT and then in the camera. It was basically the same thing, different ways of doing the same thing, right? Yeah, and the monitors and the focal points, for example. Well, people that didn't go through the live grade system, we would put it in directly in the LUT. You had Suzuka, you had several different ones with several percentages, and it was very criterious, very organized. It was really great. HD, and then we had a slide with the amount of hours and teras. So yeah, we had to compress the HDE material. You want to talk a bit while I show you the slides? Well, I want to go back to a very important part, which for me, within all this creative part, to give this technical support, the blue, for example. No, there was, Azul wanted skins, right? And Alexa 35 gave some tonal definitions where we could go from the 4 different phases and be able to unify. For example, we had some tone references that we could work on, and we were able to have, we had different things so that, for example, I'm getting to a different result. Also, we used a lagging scatter in order to give some texture in the scatter mode. 1.3%. It was very little, but just to kind of break this digital issue. We also used a lot of color front in the streaming because we had to work and we had to have a streaming that would be able to deliver this kind of image quality. So I think this bar in Tokyo, there is a Formula One issue. We eliminated the blues because we can see here we had some blue, and then we kind of cleaned things up. Something I want to show you, this image here, the before and after, the difference is very subtle. It is not something that you end up in the set, but then after the color, there are a series of things here, right? But it was something that the camera would really hold on to the colors really well. In the beginning, we had to solve, but this intensity, this saturation in Formula One, we knew we were safe. I'm speaking kind of more Spanish than Portuguese, but it's all right. The whole thing was very solid. The work was solid. We knew we could count on the material, and also the development of the LUT, that was really key for us. It already gave us almost a very advanced image. The images were very similar. There was a whole work here, but it seemed, I just want to say this because of the consequence of being able to have had so many agendas before, of us being feeling so secure with the path we were taking. So how long do we have? 8 minutes? 10 minutes? We have another 10 minutes. So Binho is going to talk about our daily work there in the filming, and then we open to questions. So this is some data that everybody likes to see, how many hours were shot, how many teras. And now there's all of this thanks to HD. HD is a light compression. And for us, it was critical because we had 40% more of the amount of materials. Well, yeah. Well, you're rewriting the information another way, but when you get all the information, it's sort of recorded there, right? So here, with regards to the LUT work, let's turn down the lights a bit, because I think this kind of image, if you can turn down the image, as Azul and Luz said, we had several color agendas. So it's more than what we had the privilege of being able to get to a set with a very defined image in our minds. So all of this process, I participated in the color agendas, and we already had an idea with what we wanted in the 4 phases, Brazil, Formula One, Imola. So So the idea, the LUT, was created by Lou, and it gave me the basis of what we wanted for each phase. Of course, each scene has its specificity, right, in terms of color, light, costumes. Each scene, what the idea here was to get the LUT prepared by Lou and comes to an agreement so that we could come to a result which was closest to the end, to the final part. We already had an idea. We would leave the set with the image which would be the closest possible, imagined by Azul and Vicente. So we had this here, this log, Alexa 35, and this conversion to Rex 709, and then we had the LUT applied, and no matter how well created is a LUT, it's not going to work for all images, all scenes. So the LUT would eliminate the space of what we want, specifically to help us define these different phases, specifically Imola, for example, which was something more specific. We had something that was more saturated. It wasn't cold, but it was paler and had highlights. And the Formula One, which were, more marked colors, and the white should always be white, to highlight all the other colors. So the idea was to use the LUT created and apply a new corrections within its limitations. We call this CBL, right? CDL. Here we have a light grade, we use primary colors, but we had a color separation. But I was able to give a general look depending on each phase.
So basically, this was our process of photographs. Thank you very much. Questions? We don't have a lot of time. Does anyone have a question? Yes, I have a question. It has more to do to Luis and the part of color. Removing all the difficulties that we know, as was said, a visual of the race. You have to go to the hotel. It's difficult to be able to insert these visuals in different scenes. Removing what was said, what was a big difficulty that you had in the colorizing part? I think Imola, the end was very demanding because we had this proposal of the photographer, very radical, and we were working in HDR, so we had there's a lot of details, and it's all stretched, and to do this was, how can I say, well, there were 765 hours of color. Someone told me this number. I think it was you. Yeah. Yes, I think that was challenging. We had to select the cars. We had to remove the headgear, and then cleaning. Months and months. I don't even know if we have time for one more question. Just one more question. Just one more. Yeah, we have a lot of questions. Yeah. First of all, I'd like to know the part that you're talking about, the references. How is this process for you? Is it more individual? You're reading the screenplays and you're already doing things, or if it's something someone helped you with this, or if it's something that you're always talking to Vicente. So how was this process to you Well, I think the preparation, I think each project has a type of different approach. So you have some directors who they have several references. There's some others that don't like references. There are some that the references are different. Some others, they hinder the excess of so this project had a lot of references. The problem was different, how to filter and reach a few images where we would that we would use. But I think each project has a process. But I like this. I like researching, and then we clean things until we reach the core of what we're finding. Because sometimes it's easier when you say what you more or less are believing in with words. But so that's it. Thank you very much to everyone. We won't have more time right now, but I invite you all to go to the stand, to go and talk to Chase. I think it's worthwhile talking to him. Can we also win a prize? Well, okay, let's do that. We have one more table, which we hope the look of the camera that has